Hello, Greg. I'm delighted to be chatting with you. Award-winning musician, author, screenwriter, and playwright. Greg Stewart, myself and Steve here.
Good to
Hi,
see you
Greg.
both. Hi.
Yeah, and you. And I believe you're in Cardiff, is that right?
A
Um,
little town just outside of Cardiff. Yeah. I live in a place called Llanthwaite Vardra, which is it's not far from Llantrystent, which some people know from the Royal Mint.
right,
It's
okay.
kind of
I'm
yeah, it's
not
just
familiar, to be honest, but I thought I'd ask because I do. I've been to Cardiff a couple of times,
yeah. I
but
mean, I'm from Cardiff. I lived most of my life in Cardiff, but we've kind of moved out a
yeah.
few years back. So yeah,
Okay,
it's
fair enough. Before we talk about your prolific career and writing and everything else you've done, what do you do to relax, hobbies and things like that? I mean, obviously you've got a daughter to look after, as you've just told us about.
Mhm.
But what sort of hobbies do you get up to?
Um, I mean, I mean, I don't have a great deal of time, but if I'm going to have some downtime, I'll read or I'll watch a film. I mean, those are my main things that I do. I mean, I'm a big movie buff, and I try and keep up with things. Um, going back, I've used to play music and used to play in a band a lot. So I'm still in a band now, technically, a band called Nemesis Uncle, but we're kind of on hiatus just at the moment. We were kind of gearing up to play some gigs pre-COVID, and then it kind of all fell apart. And then, tragically, actually, the bass player who was in the band he passed away. He
Oh,
died last year from unexpected cancer diagnosis. So myself and Darren, the other guy in the band, Darren kind of is the main guy in the band. He plays guitar and sings, and I'm on the drums. We've been talking recently about trying to get things back together again for this year. So if that, but it's the kind of thing that it's how much of it is a relaxing thing, how much of it is just another project that you end up kind of committing yourself to. So yeah, relaxing for me is reading or watching a film last thing before I go to bed. That's my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to mention the band, but I thought I'm not sure whether I class it as a hobby or sometimes that can be quite stressful, I can imagine.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
as you've
yeah,
just explained, yeah, fair enough.
yeah. I used to be in bands all through the '90s, really, and that was going to be my thing, and it kind of um delayed my whole writing ambition, really, because I wanted to be a writer when I was younger. That was what I was going to do, and then I got into music, and so that suddenly, oh no, this is the thing I'm going to do. And for about 10 years, that's I was in bands and we are trying to get a deal, playing gigs all the time, and the writing just took a back seat. So it was only when that didn't work out that I thought, yeah, this is what I was supposed to do along was the writing. So
okay. Yep, as we mentioned, your writing covers a wide spectrum. Should we break
yeah,
this chat down into maybe three sections? We talk about the novels, the
yeah,
theatre, and then your screenplay work.
yeah, it'd be great.
Good, good. You've got a standalone novel, how do you pronounce it? Astarata? Astara?
Ast Astatara.
Astatara. It's easy for you to say. And a series of novels, Shadow Earth, with 3 volumes so far. Wolfhead, The Strange Case of Sarah Wynter, and Ferris Wheel. Tell us about these. How many have you got planned for the series?
Okay. Well, I published Wolfhead in self-published in early 2020, and for that book, I mean, in terms of style and structure, it's essentially a crime novel
Okay.
about a police detective, Sel Wells, who's looking for a man called Slade who's murdered a series of people, including someone she knew. And in the first chapter, Sal's attacked and left for dead, seemingly because someone doesn't want to find out the truth of who this killer is. And so she goes rogue, assumes a new identity, and uncovers this kind of shadowy trail to various organizations that are behind this man. And at the same time, got a teenager called Hannah who lives in care, real firebrand, angry with everyone and everything. And she comes across this Slade character hiding out in the woods and sees that he's not a normal man at all. And from there, she starts to believe all sorts of things about herself and the world, things that suggest there's much more going on than this Slade character. And so it's the book is essentially like I don't know, like Prime Suspect meets The Thing or something like that. It's
Yeah.
it's a mashup of kind of crime and horror. I've tried to make it as gripping as possible, stripped down story, but with very strong characters, and people have responded to it really well. But it was always meant to be a series that went bigger. So lots of other places drawing in elements of fantasy and sci-fi, referencing lots of subgenres. So Wolfhead has shades of a werewolf story, and the sequel, Strange Case of Sarah Wynter, which both continues the story of the characters in Wolfhead and sets up a new story about a writer getting tangled up with a secret society. I mean, that uses elements of doppelgangers and time travel. And then in Ferris Wheel, which is not directly part of the series, but a standalone novella, is about a teenage boy back in the 1970s whose day-to-day life has become fragmented into different realities, one of which involves him being hunted by a vampire. So all these stories connect, and they're building towards a bigger narrative that allows me to indulge my love of all these kind of classic horror and sci-fi tropes. So I'm writing the third in the series now, just finished the first draft of it, and hopefully that'll come out later this year.
Sound great.
Yeah, the series, I mean, hopefully, I think it'll probably be around 6 books in total. That'll be the series. Yeah. And then Astatara is a standalone kind of sci-fi novel. And that's about 2 kids who fall into this orb of light, this mysterious orb of light, and they're suddenly stranded in an icy wilderness that doesn't seem to be anywhere on Earth. And it also follows the children's father, whose own obsession with this orb has maybe caused them to be lost in the first place, and how there's almost like a generational curse on his family that connects this event to other disasters. And again, it's in the speculative genre. It's got elements of mythic fantasy and time travel, but less horror than the other series. But I really wanted to write something that's both kind of heartfelt and maybe a little bit heartbreaking as well in terms of dysfunctional family dynamics. And so that's kind of quite an ambitious novel that not many people have read that one. So I'm keen to, I've just started to promote it recently and get some sales on it. So I'm keen to kind of get some feedback to see how that goes down. So yeah, those are my books really. That's where I am with that. I mean, I've got another series called The Devil's Fairy Tale, which I did self-publish as a trilogy back in 2016. Yeah. But that was before I understood anything. The first thing about self-publishing, and it was more of a reaction to being rejected by so many kind of agents and
we've heard that so often
that I just thought, I'm just going to self-publish it, So I threw them out there and didn't really have any strategy or plan at all, and it didn't work. They just didn't sell. Yeah. So I pulled them off and went, I ended up trying to do it properly with Wolfhead, But I've got that series which I'm currently rewriting into 5 novels, and the first one is all good to go. I've just got to work out the best time to publish it, because obviously with self-publishing, a big thing is about having a strategy and not just chucking everything out there. So
Yeah, so I was going to ask about how many books you've got planned in the series, but you've mentioned now those 6 for this one year currently in, and then you've probably got 5 when you get the other one.
When the other one get going,
yeah. So was writing novels your first ambition before you went along the screenplays and all the other options? And
yeah, I think so. I mean, I always when I was a teenager, that's what I assumed I was going to do, and I had a very kind of naive plan. I thought, I left school at 18. I didn't go to university. I mean, I probably could have, but I didn't. And I just got a job at 18, and I thought, I'll get a job to earn some money, and then I'll write a book, and then that'll be it, and I'll be sorted. And as I said earlier, I didn't really do that until actually I was about 30. That's when I actually started writing properly. And by that time, I'm not sure. It was the whole learning curve, because I mean, writing a book in your head and actually doing it is a totally different thing, So there was a long learning curve, and that's what I was going to do on its own. But then I ended up getting kind of dragged into screenplays. I mean, I've always loved film, and it was always in my mind maybe something I would do that as well. But a good friend of mine, Chris Hampson, who was an actor, I went to school with him, but he's an actor, and he ended up just saying, I've got an idea for a film. You're writing a book, aren't you? And I was like, yeah. So, well, why don't we write a screenplay? So he kind of pushed me into that, and I ended up kind of pursuing both things at the same time: the novels on the one hand and screenplays on the other. So it was, I'm not sure how wise it was in terms of strategy, because I was learning how to write novels and learning how to write screenplays, which are different things, and so it probably doubled the amount of time it took me before I could, I knew how to do both, but. Writing's always been there.
Yeah.
So tell us about the theatrical writing. You mentioned the screenplays. We'll talk about them in a few minutes.
Yeah, okay.
The screenplay Eden on your excellent website, warwriter.com. It's got a great link to some reviews of the play, where it won the Best New Play Awards as part of the Birmingham Festival in July last year. Tell us about the play.
Yeah, I mean, that was a funny thing, because I've never written a play before, and it came from my friend Chris. We spent all this time working on these various TV and film projects, and he was keen to do something on the stage. He hadn't done it for a while, and he had another actor he was very keen to work with, a guy I didn't know at the time, but I do now, Ollie Hume. And so Chris said to me, well, can't we just change one of our screenplays into a play? Can't we just make it adapted for the stage? And we were talking about that. And as we were talking about it, I just started thinking of something completely different. I had this another idea altogether, and I just went away and wrote Eden. And I mean, the idea, the setup is, essentially two men on a self-help retreat, and one of them's like a novice who's looking to learn more about this particular self-help system, and the other is like a guru who's got a reputation for transforming lives. But it soon becomes clear that this novice has got an ulterior motive, and this may or may not involve a murder. And really, it's a psychological thriller, like a classic two-hander with these two men stuck in a room together, and the power dynamic between them constantly shifts, and the audience, hopefully, they don't know which one of them is lying or telling the truth at any one given moment about who they are and what they're trying to get. And I wrote this. It was an experiment for me. I didn't know whether it was going to work. Chris loved it, and we ended up that year of 2020, when everyone was locked up. No theaters were closed, and we ended up organizing these various Zoom meetings and doing Zoom readings of the play for a number of directors, and it just seemed to be going down really well everywhere. Everywhere they performed it online. And then I applied to get on to this Birmingham festival, which you did, and we were only on for a few nights, but it was we sold some good tickets and won the award, which was really gratifying. And especially, like I said, never written a play before. I just didn't expect it to be so successful. I mean, where I am now is that I've got this play and I'm trying to get it on again somewhere else, but that's proving to be a whole new challenge. I don't know anything about the theatre world particularly, and it seems to be just as difficult as everything else in terms of getting people to read it and want to kind of invest in it. So that's where I am now, trying to get it back on somewhere else.
So have you got any plans for screenplays for your other novels as well, or is that a longer term goal?
I'm not at the moment. I mean, I think Wolfhead would make a good film or TV series. I think it could be done, but that's not on my list at the moment. I think if the book took off and it was successful, I guess that's something that would happen. But so all these things, it's a lot of work, and as perhaps we'll get onto in a moment, the film industry, TV industry is just so difficult to get into, and you have to kind of I think you have to be careful about where you spend your time, slogging away at something, getting something done, if it's not going to go anywhere. That's certainly why I feel now after all this time. I don't want to just do stuff. When I was first writing, I would just think, oh, that's a great idea, and I would spend however many months just writing something, and then thinking this will work, this will sell, and it doesn't go anywhere. So
we've chatted to a few writers, novelists, and they've said that they've been approached by film companies or agents, and even if they buy the television or film rights, they hear nothing. It could be like a couple of years will go by, and it just seems to disappear. I think it's a matter of luck as well, isn't it? Luck and timing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a successful enough novelist to kind of generate that kind of interest anyway. But I mean, for writers who are, I mean, I know you spoke to Matthew Harffy recently, and he's certainly at that kind of level where you think he would be. There would be enough interest for him to be optioned or whatever. But I know that the film and TV industry is very, more than ever before, is geared around IP, that an existing intellectual property that they can do something with, and that it's got a pre-existing audience of some kind. So if you're writing original screenplays, you're really on a hiding to nothing, because you're not going to be able to get anyone interested in it. The best you can hope for with an original screenplay, in terms of selling it to the industry, is a calling card, and if it's really good, then they may hire you then to write something else, but they're probably almost never going to make the thing that you've written, so that's something I learned a little bit the hard way. I think the only way you can, if you're passionate about your screenplays, to make it yourself. I mean, that's the only way to kind of go is try and find the money and make things yourself. It's the only way in, I think.
As you mentioned, you spoke to Matthew Harffy, you know, the historical novelist. What a guy he was. We had a great chat with him.
Did you?
I mean, it was, wasn't it, Terry? Yeah.
It was.
And he told us about the Serpent Sword TV project. And you did the professional trailer for that, didn't you? Now, was that difficult to do? That was amazing. That was really amazing. It's a great work.
That was a real it was a real journey there. I mean, the order of things was that I came on board to that. That Matthew was already working with this film production company, and they were looking for a writer. So I got the gig doing that, and so the first thing I did was kind of wrote the proposal for the adaptation, so a 9-episode breakdown of how we would turn this book into a TV series, and then I wrote the pilot episode. So the first episode of the series as it would be, whichever it was, 60 minutes or whatever, and then we decided at that point that we would do the trailer. We would make this proof of concept teaser trailer for the series as it might be were it to exist. So then I wrote the screenplay for that. But we were all involved in every stage, and we were all involved in like a little bit, in terms of the filming and casting people for that. And so that was a really good experience. And it was the combination, I think, of that trailer and the pilot script that really seemed to get people interested. Certainly everyone we showed it to was really kind of interested and raving about it. But unfortunately, none of the interested parties were the producers or development people who could greenlight something. And that's the thing, getting in a room with those key people. That's the really, really hard part, and so as Matthew said to you before, we're a little bit stalled on it at the moment, but who knows? We're still, it's still there, and it still could kind of come together at some point,
So, your name is Beobran. And where have you come from?
Katwara.
The south. We don't place much trust in men from the south.
Plague took his family.
Tell me, Beobran of the south, what is in your heart?
Tell us about Loki's game. This is in post-production with Tornado Films. How exciting is that?
It should be exciting, yeah.
Oh.
It should be exciting. I mean, the history of that is a little bit complicated. So, I've probably written, I don't know, about 20 screenplays over the years, either with Chris or by myself. And Loki's Game came along in 2017 on the back of a horror script. I'd written a horror film called The Fade, which they were really interested in making, but it was a departure. It wasn't the kind of thing they normally made. So they ummed and ahed about it for a long time. And then I think it was late October 17, they said, no, we're not going to make it, but we've got to make a film in January. Yeah. So will you write us an original script? So we're filming in January kind of thing. So it's like, wow.
No pressure on you.
So it was like about 6 weeks to write something completely, from blank page. And Chris and I came up with this idea for like a Viking horror film, because that was the kind of films they were making. They were making kind of period Roman Viking action stuff. And so it was all looking really good. The script, I don't know if the script was perfect, but it had some good ideas in it, and it went into production. It was filmed. They filmed it in February, March 18, I think, in the end. But then a year later, when it should have been on, approaching release, it was nearly finished. I think there was a little bit of post-production to do, maybe some more editing to do. The company ran into financial difficulties, so it kind of just got put on ice, and I don't really know what's happening with it at the moment. It is technically it's in post-production. It might come out at some point, but I don't know. So it was really good experience, but it's been frustrating because to get a production credit would have been, at that stage would have been great, but it's on IMDb, and I got the photos, and it's something I did, and it's so you can you can point to it, but it doesn't have quite the same value as if it had been actually released and seen by people.
I'm frustrated for you listening to that. That's really annoying. That's
annoyed
me. Yeah.
No, it was a really difficult time. And it was literally at the time, the January, February of 19, we just kept expecting to come out, and they'd actually hired me to write another screenplay. And so I'd written this, they decided they would make a horror film. So I'd written a original screenplay, and Chris was going to be in the film. And that was all due to go into production. And literally that's when everything fell apart, and that film got cancelled. So, that was a dark week when all that suddenly dropped on us.
Mm-hmm.
So but that's.
So is that probably the one you'd want to see on the big screen? Is it Loki's Game or
no? Probably not. I mean, yes, because the fact it was made, I'd love to see it be released. I mean, largely for all the people who are involved. I mean, it's like it was like a couple of months' work for lots and lots of people. There's lots of people involved in these things. So it would be nice for it to be out there. In terms of my writing, I've got other scripts which I prefer, and things that I would really love to see made. And I got a few things going on. I work with a production company on some ideas, and it's a constant battle to get people interested in it. So I mean, I've got a number of things that are possibles kind of on the burner with various people, but right at the moment there's nothing active.
What's your preference then of all writing? Is it novels, plays, or screenplays? I'm guessing you're going to say screenplays, but I don't know. I vacillate between one thing to the other, really. I mean, the thing I'm most interested in is usually the thing I'm doing at that moment. I like it all. I probably find, I probably am more naturally suited to writing screenplays. I'm not sure why that is. That comes a little bit easier to me. But the lack of end result, because you're relying on someone else to get it out there, also puts you off a little bit. But with the novels, I do love writing the novels. With the self-publishing option, well, no one can stop you. You can put it out there, and you can you're in control of everything yourself. So that's both have got pluses and minuses. So I'd like to write more plays. I've just wrote that one play. I've got some ideas. I'd like to do more, but again, I don't want to invest time doing that until this other play gets back on stage somewhere and somebody's interested in it. So like you say, you need to do some research into theatres, because it's not your forte, really, is it, as well? So,
exactly. That makes sense. I just love writing. I mean, I'm happiest when I'm writing, I think, and when it's going well. And every writing project's got difficulties and moments where you just don't think it's any good, and then you come back to it and I think, no, it's really good, and you fall in and out of love with things all the time. But I just I just do love writing anything, really.
You get the instant feedback as well with the books. If you're lucky enough to get a review off anybody, but you can see yourself, your sales day by day on Amazon, and you can see that not instant gratification, but a result, an impact that your writing's had, rather than waiting this long amount of frustrated time.
Exactly, and you're also writing the finished project, finished product. And you write a screenplay is only ever a template for someone else to make something.
It's a director's medium, isn't it?
It is. Directing and editing, particularly. I think that's where all the all the final decisions are made. And
going off on tangents. Sorry, I was going to ask. Triple thoughts. What software are you using to writing the screenplays and the stage plays? Are you using Fade In or Final Draft?
I use Final Draft for the screenwriting. Yeah, so I do all my novels just in Word, but Final Draft for the screenwriting, because the templates are they're all kind of set up, and Have you done any of that kind of writing yourself?
I've got one novel out which started off as a screenplay. I did a master's in screenwriting about 20 years ago, and part of the final thesis was to create a screenplay. I wrote that. Wasn't very good now looking back at it. I thought it was brilliant at the time, but I decided to write a novel instead. Right. I think because there was more sort of more inner thoughts going on, which can't happen on the big screen.
Exactly.
It was visual.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's this internal sort of dilemmas and conflicts that had to come out in the narrative form. rather than visual.
Yeah, I think a novel allows you to be more expressive, definitely.
Yeah.
So, when you're writing, whether it be books or screenplays or whatever, do you have a set time of a day that you do that? Do you lay aside maybe 5 or 6 hours a day to do it, or do you just ad lib and write as and when, or set times?
Yeah, it depends. What I mean, at the moment, I've got another job, so I'm 4 days a week working on another job, and so you're limited in terms of when you can do it. I mean, I've had periods where I've just written, and especially when I've had some commissions and stuff, and so if in those periods, yeah, I literally I'll start at 8 or 9 in the morning, and I'll just write all day, and I'm happy doing that. I do try and write every day, but I mean, it's difficult sometimes. I mean, I think that is the best discipline, but it's not always possible. And especially when you're also that like with the self-publishing stuff, there's an element to kind of your social media presence and your marketing and all that kind of stuff, and that takes time. You can't just throw that stuff out there. So yeah, I don't have a set routine really. I write when I can, but I mean, generally, I'd be happy writing all day long if I have the time.
Yeah, I mean, I only dabbled a little bit with writing some very short novels, and it was a chore for me more than anything. So I sort of found it's taken a back seat, and I've not done it. Terry keeps trying to ask me to pick it up again and do it, but I haven't got the heart in it. I don't think. Heart's not in it.
It can be a real chore, I think, particularly novels, and that first draft of a novel is it can be brutal, and this one I've just finished now, the third in the Shadow Earth series, I've been working on this first draft for about 18 months, and it's because of other work commitments that I haven't been able to be quicker, but yeah, it can feel like a slog, definitely, but I think it's once you've got that first draft down, I mean, it doesn't really matter how good that draft is. Once you've done that draft, and you can rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it, and that's a different kind of approach when you're just rewriting stuff.
Can I ask you about your website, warwriter.com?
Yes.
Did you create the website? It looks great, by the way. I'm looking at it now on the other screen.
Thanks. That's I did create it. I've worked on it on and off over the last few years. Nobody ever mentioned my website, so I appreciate someone telling me it looks good.
No, it looks great. It looks
totally professional. It looks good as well. I think it looks great. Yeah. I tried. It's just like a calling card, really. I guess it's it's a portal to buying the books, but it's also just a little calling card with the other stuff. I got all my screenplay kind of templates on headings on there, and it just allows me to say, hey, look at me, look how good I am. So I do like my website.
Yeah, nice one. Yeah, I mean, you've partly answered some of this, but finally from me, what advice would you give to an aspiring writer, who's out there for the first time? Well, a bit like I was, I've dabbled a bit, and found I got bored with it and didn't have the patience. So what would you say the best way to go is then?
Well, I think it depends. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends how serious you are. I think, some people just fancy the idea of writing a book, and that's a different thing. I don't know what to say to that so much but if you're serious about writing, if you think that you want to be a writer, I mean, that's kind of was always my intention. I was never just dabbling. I think that, the only way to do it is to write, and it's the only way is actually write it. I mean, there's lots of books on how to write books, and and I think they're fine. They're worth reading, but they're not going to really tell you how to do it. I mean, they can tell you set up the basics, and they can point out to obvious mistakes you can make. But the only really way to do it is to write it and keep writing and writing and writing and finish it. And then when you finish it, accept that it's probably not going to be great, because your first thing isn't probably going to be great. I mean, there's not many geniuses out there. So, and then you write another one, or you rewrite it. My first book I wrote, I probably spent about a year writing it, and it wasn't very good. It was just, and I never went back to it. I thought, well, okay, that was interesting. I thought it was going to be great, and then you get to the end, and I read it. No, it wasn't. So then I wrote another one. And you have to keep writing, I think, and that's where you learn. And then the other thing is to read a lot. I think reading a lot, is a huge thing, and that's much more important than learning. Trying to study how to write is actually just read books and read good writers, and bad writers. Read everything you can, in the genres you like, and maybe in genres you don't normally read. read classic fiction, read popular fiction, whatever. And I think all that it just all goes in. But you've got to be determined. I think you've got to be determined, and you've also got to have a bit of a thick skin, because you can't expect people to be interested. You've got to the world doesn't really care when you start out. So you've got to do it for yourself in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, as we found out, or we've heard about, some of the best authors out there, the biggest, most experienced ones in the world, were all knocked back first time. Well, not all of them, but a good few of them, the more prolific ones, been knocked back in the first once, twice, whatever. And that must be frustrating, I suppose. Well, it is. I know it's frustrating, and that's the difficult bit. I think you're right. You've just got to keep doing it. Writing and writing, reading and reading. That's the impression I get. So I think that's great advice. Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah. But on that note, Greg, it's been absolute brilliance chatting to you. Really enjoyed it. And really appreciate your time.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. And if anyone's interested, have a look at my website. Look at me on Facebook. I've got quite active on Facebook. And my novel Astatara is currently only 99 pence. There we go. So how about that? It's a bargain.
Brilliant.
Yeah. We're looking forward to a screenplay in your name on the big screen anyway.
We are, yeah. Loki's
after looking at that trailer with Matthew, I thought that was
brilliant.
Yeah, really was.
Yeah. Well, I can say that so am
I. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Love it.
But Greg, let's keep in touch as we have been.
Yep. Thanks very much, and appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. It's been great.
Oh, thank you.
Been our pleasure. Thanks for that, Greg. Yeah. But for now, mate, cheers.
Take care.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks.